a werewolf shifter romance audiobook written by Jane. Prologue. The bond. It wasn't just a feeling. It was a living, breathing thing, a shimmering thread of light woven into the very fabric of her soul. From the moment she was born, Isla had felt its gentle hum, a quiet promise of belonging, of a destiny intertwined with another. It was the sacred truth of her world, given by the goddess herself. Every Omega had a fated mate, and their bond was unbreakable. She had dreamed of the day Kian, her Alpha-in-waiting, would claim her because it meant her soul would finally find its other half. But destiny, it turned out, was a cruel, deceptive whisper. The air, once sweet with ceremonial herbs, turned to ash in her lungs. The pack, her family, their faces blurred into a sea of judgment and pity. His words, Kian's words, were not a gentle severing, but a brutal, tearing rip. I reject the bond with Isla. She is defective, unfit. Just like that, the shimmering thread snapped. Her soul screamed. It wasn't just a sound. It was a raw, primal agony that tore through her very being because the pain was physical, a gaping wound where her bond once was. She fell. Not to the ground, but into an abyss of humiliation and despair. The cold weight settled in her chest, crushing her. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. All she could feel was the searing pain of betrayal, the crushing shame under the pack's collective pitying gaze. Her world, once so clear, shattered into a million sharp pieces. And then, something else erupted. Not the gentle hum of her Omega nature, but a wild, untamed roar from deep within her. A terrifying surge of power, hot and uncontrollable, ripped through her veins. It sparked in her eyes, a flicker of unnatural, savage light. The ground trembled beneath her, a silent testament to the raw force she now held. She gasped, a desperate, choked sound trying to suppress it, to hide this monstrous new thing that confirmed Kian's cruel words. No, not here, not now. She fled, blind with tears and a terrifying, burgeoning power. The howls of the pack, not of celebration but of shocked pity, chased her into the night. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs gave out, until the forest swallowed her whole. She was cast out, broken. But what truly terrified her was not dying alone in the wilderness. It was the monstrous power that had awakened within her, a savage, primal magic no Omega should possess. She didn't know what scared her more, the idea of dying alone, or becoming the monster everyone believed a rejected Omega turned into. Her greatest fear was becoming the very thing they already saw her as. This was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning of a terrifying, beautiful transformation. A cold dread coiled in Isla's stomach. It wasn't the usual pre-ceremony jitters. It was something far deeper, a whisper of unease that chilled her to the bone. Tonight, under the fat, luminous full moon, her destiny would finally unfold. She smoothed the silken folds of her ceremonial gown, the fabric cool against her skin, a stark contrast to the frantic pulse thrumming beneath. Her fingers, usually nimble with healing salves, trembled slightly as she adjusted the delicate silver circlet in her hair. Every Omega in the Silverwood pack dreamed of this day, this sacred bonding. But for Isla, it felt less like a dream and more like a gentle, inevitable current carrying her towards an unknown shore. Her reflection stared back, a young woman in her early 20s with eyes the color of moss after a spring rain, wide and earnest. She saw the soft curve of her jaw, the slight flush on her cheeks, the quiet hope that had been nurtured since childhood. Her role as an Omega was one of gentle strength, of nurturing and empathy. She embraced it fully because it was all she had ever known. Her worth, she had always believed, was woven into the fabric of this life, into the promise of a fated bond with Alpha-in-waiting Kian. He was the pack's future. She, his destined mate, would be his anchor. A soft knock at the door. Her sister, Alara, poked her head in, eyes bright with unshed tears. "You look beautiful, Isla," Alara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "He's a lucky alpha." Isla offered a small, genuine smile. "And I a lucky Omega. The words felt true, a comfort she clung to. She imagined Kian, his strong jaw, the confident set of his shoulders, the way his dark eyes would meet hers across the clearing. Tonight, he would claim her, and their souls would finally recognize the ancient, unbreakable thread that bound them. Her heart swelled, a fragile, exquisite thing because she had waited for this moment her entire life. Yet, as she turned from the mirror, a fleeting, almost imperceptible flicker of unease crossed her features. It was like a shadow passing over the sun, a whisper of discord in the perfect harmony of her anticipation. She dismissed it as pre-ceremony jitters, a common nervousness. Still, the feeling lingered, a vague sense that something wasn't quite right, a discordant note in the symphony of her life. The air still hummed with excitement, but for a fleeting second, Isla felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. She didn't know what scared her more, the idea of the ceremony or the strange, cold feeling that came with it. Soon after, as the sun dipped below the ancient pines, painting the sky in fiery streaks of orange and purple, Isla found herself near the Alpha's private den. She was on her way to gather the last of the ceremonial moon petal blossoms, their delicate scent a promise of the night's magic. But then, hushed voices, sharp with tension, drifted from within. It was Kian, his voice low and strained, arguing with his father, the current Alpha, about pack duties. "The southern borders are weak, father." Kian's voice cut through the evening air, tight with frustration. "We cannot afford to waste resources on trivialities." "Trivialities, Kian?" The Alpha's voice boomed, heavy with authority. "The welfare of all our pack members is never trivial, especially not now with the whispers from the wildlands." Isla froze, her hand hovering over a cluster of moon petals. Whispers? What whispers? Her heart skipped a beat. Kian appeared burdened, his posture stiff, his responses curt. He seemed distant and preoccupied, his usual confident stride replaced by a restless pacing. As he emerged from the den, his eyes, usually so commanding, were clouded with a deep-seated worry that seemed to consume him. He barely acknowledged Isla's presence with a quick, distracted nod when she passed by, his gaze already sweeping past her, focused on something unseen in the distance. The weight of his impending Alpha responsibilities was visibly heavy upon him, a crushing burden that seemed to age him before her eyes. Isla's goal was to understand Kian better, to connect with him on a deeper level before the ceremony, and to reassure herself of their bond. She felt a pang of concern for his visible stress, but also a growing unease about his detachment and the subtle, dismissive way he treated her. Her hopeful anticipation from Scene 1.1 was now tinged with a nascent anxiety, a bitter taste in her mouth. She tried to rationalize his behavior, attributing it to the immense pressures of his role, because he was, after all, the future Alpha. What followed was a quiet ache in her chest, a feeling of being unseen, unheard. As she watched him stride away, a thought, cold and unsettling, pricked at her mind. Could Kian truly be ready for the bond, for her, when he carried such a heavy, unseen burden? This scene introduced Kian's character beyond the idealized, fated mate, highlighting his internal struggles that would later contribute to his catastrophic actions. It subtly began to chip away at Isla's idealized view of her fated mate, planting the first seeds of doubt about the perfection of her destiny. Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was just a bad omen. Later, as the last rays of twilight faded, painting the forest in shades of deep indigo, Isla found herself in the communal kitchens, helping prepare the ceremonial feast. The air buzzed with the aroma of roasted meats and sweet berries. But beneath the festive chatter, a different kind of sound began to emerge. Hushed, anxious conversations among other Omegas and lower-ranking pack members. Their voices were low, conspiratorial, like rustling leaves in a gathering storm. "Did you hear about the border skirmish?" One Omega, a nervous young woman named Lyra, whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Kian handled it. Poorly. Many were injured, because he was too proud to listen to the elders. "And the sickness in the northern territories," another added, her voice barely audible. It's spreading. The Alpha says it's just a seasonal illness, but my grandmother, she says it's like the old blight. Isla's breath hitched. The blight. A chilling word from ancient tales. A sickness that withered the land and the very spirit of the shifters. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't ignore the fear creeping into their voices. One Omega nervously mentioned the old tales of defective Omegas who are rejected and cast out, their fate a cautionary tale whispered through generations. They say the goddess abandons them, Lyra murmured, her gaze flicking towards Isla for a moment before darting away. Isla's immediate goal was to dismiss these unsettling whispers, to defend Kian in her mind, and to maintain her hopeful outlook on her future. She felt a rising anxiety and defensiveness, trying desperately to rationalize away the doubts. Her heart pounded so loudly she worried others could hear it. But the seeds of fear about her own potential defectiveness, a concept she previously considered only in abstract terms, were now concretely planted in her mind, directly challenging her core misbelief. This scene directly undermined Isla's unwavering belief in the pack's perfect order and Kian's infallibility, because it exposed the cracks in their seemingly perfect world. As the whispers faded, Isla felt a strange, uncontrolled surge of energy deep within her, a fleeting warmth or tremor that vibrated through her bones, like a distant drumbeat. She quickly dismissed it as mere nerves about the ceremony, because her body was simply reacting to the stress. But it was the first, subtle, and terrifying sign of her dormant, savage power stirring beneath the surface. Her world tilted, just a fraction, and she didn't know what scared her more, the whispers of the blight or the wild pulse of something new and terrifying within her own skin. The air thickened, suffocating Isla with the weight of expectation. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Beneath the moonlight, the ceremonial clearing shimmered, packed with every member of the Silverwood pack. Their faces, usually warm and familiar, now seemed to blur into a single expectant gaze. This was it. The moment she had lived for, the culmination of her destiny. She stepped forward, the soft grass cool beneath her bare feet, her breath catching in her throat. Kian stood at the altar, bathed in the moon's silver glow, his silhouette sharp against the ancient oak. He was magnificent, undeniably. His dark hair, usually impeccably styled, was ruffled by the breeze, giving him a wild, untamed look. Isla's gaze sought his, expecting the warmth, the recognition, the deep, soul-stirring pull of their fated bond. But then, his eyes met hers, and a chill, colder than any winter night, seeped into her bones. They were cold, devoid of recognition, empty. Her world tilted. A beat later, Kian turned his head, his gaze sweeping past her as if she were invisible. His voice, usually a deep rumble that resonated with authority, cut through the quiet night like a blade of ice. I, Kian, Alpha-in-waiting of the Silverwood pack, reject the bond with Isla. Silence. The word hung in the air, a poisoned dart. Isla froze, her entire being screaming in protest. Reject? No. It couldn't be. This wasn't how destiny worked. This wasn't how the goddess-given bond functioned. Her vision blurred, the faces of the pack members swimming before her eyes. Their collective gasp was a physical blow, followed by a silence so profound it roared in her ears. And just like that, everything changed. Kian took a step, not towards her, but towards another Omega, a younger, more compliant one named Lyra, the same one who had whispered fears of the blight. Lyra, whose eyes were wide with a mix of shock and triumph. Kian's hand, the one meant to mark Isla, reached out and, with a swift, brutal motion, marked Lyra's neck. The scent of fresh blood, of a newly forged bond, assaulted Isla's senses, sickening her. She is fit, Kian declared, his voice ringing with a false authority that grated against Isla's raw nerves. Isla is defective, unfit for an alpha. She is cast out. The casual dismissal cut through her shock, slicing deeper than any blade. defective. The word echoed the whispers she'd heard, confirming her deepest, most primal fear. Her soul, already severed, shattered into a million pieces. A cold weight settled in her chest, crushing her. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. All she could feel was the searing pain of betrayal, the crushing humiliation under the pack's collective, pitying gaze. Without warning, an overwhelming surge of raw, untamed power erupted within her. It wasn't a gentle hum, but a violent, uncontrollable tremor that shook the very ground beneath her feet. A flicker of unnatural, wild light, like lightning, sparked in her moss-green eyes. She gasped, a desperate, choked sound, trying to suppress it, to hide this monstrous new thing that confirmed Kian's cruel words. No, not here, not now. Her immediate, primal goal was simply to escape, to disappear from the unbearable shame, pain, and the feeling of being utterly worthless. Her body moved on instinct. She turned, blind with tears and a terrifying, burgeoning power, and fled into the suffocating darkness of the surrounding forest. The howls of the pack, not of celebration, but of shocked pity, chased her into the night. The forest became a living nightmare. Days blurred into a haze of exposure, starvation, and profound emotional trauma. Each step was agony, her bare feet torn and bleeding from sharp rocks and thorny undergrowth. The chill of the night seeped into her bones, but it was the cold of Kian's rejection that truly froze her from the inside out. Her throat ached, raw from unshed tears and desperate, silent screams. She was alone, truly, utterly alone. Her suppressed power, now untethered by the rejection, began to manifest uncontrollably. It was a savage, unpredictable force, reacting to her despair, her rage, her overwhelming fear. One moment, a patch of wildflowers she touched withered and died, their vibrant petals crumbling to dust beneath her fingers. Another time, a small rock, caught in her desperate stride, levitated for a terrifying second before crashing down, leaving a small crater. The air around her would crackle with unseen energy, making the hairs on her arms stand on end because her very being was now a conduit for something wild and untamed. She tried to hide these occurrences, even from herself, burying them beneath layers of denial and terror. This power, she believed, was a monstrous affliction, something that confirmed her defective status. It was the mark of the outcast, the broken. She didn't know what scared her more, dying alone in the vast, unforgiving wilderness, or becoming the monster everyone believed a rejected Omega turned into. Her immediate goal was bare survival against the elements. But even more urgently, it was to hide and suppress this terrifying, unpredictable force. She was consumed by overwhelming grief, the raw pain of betrayal, and a deep-seated terror of this new, wild, and uncontrollable aspect of herself. She was at her absolute lowest point, psychologically and physically, because every breath felt like a fight against oblivion. One evening, as the last sliver of sun bled from the sky, painting the clouds in bruised purples and grays, a sudden, violent tremor shook the ground. Isla cried out, falling to her knees, her body racked with a power she couldn't contain. Trees around her groaned, their branches swaying as if in a furious wind, though the air was still. This struggle solidified her internal conflict, whether to succumb to the fear and reject this power, or to somehow find a way to control it, even if she still believed it made her a monster. Exhausted, dehydrated, and on the very verge of collapse, Isla saw a shadowy, wolf-like figure observing her from the dense undergrowth. Its eyes, 2 points of golden light, glinted in the fading light, fixed on her with an unnerving intensity. She was too weak to react, her vision blurring, the world spinning into a terrifying darkness. The world returned in fragments. The damp earth beneath her, the scent of wood smoke and something wild, pine and wet fur, filling her nostrils. Her eyelids fluttered open, heavy as lead. Above her, a face. Not Kian's, not familiar, but carved from granite, harsh and unyielding, yet with eyes that held a strange, assessing intensity. This was Malachi. His presence was a solid, real thing, a stark contrast to the fleeting shadows of her despair. He was a lichen, she realized, his scent different from the Silverwood shifters carrying the raw, untamed essence of the wilderness. His face was scarred, a map of battles fought and won, but his hands, as he gently lifted her, were surprisingly careful. She felt the warmth of his skin, the powerful thrum of his muscles beneath her. He carried her without a word, his movements fluid and strong, deeper into the forest. She was too weak to protest, too broken to resist. Eventually, they arrived at a hidden enclave, a temporary camp nestled deep within the wildlands. It wasn't the orderly, structured village of her past. Instead, it was a bustling, vibrant chaos of shifters who lived outside traditional pack law. They moved with a primal grace, their laughter echoing through the trees, their eyes holding a fierce, independent spark. They were the savage shifters, a name whispered with fear in her old pack. But here, they simply were. Malachi set her down gently by a crackling fire. Other shifters, their faces painted with tribal marks, their clothes made of rough hides, approached cautiously. They looked at her not with pity or judgment, or the cold dismissal she had come to expect. Instead, their gazes held curiosity, a flicker of intrigue. They seemed to sense the raw, untamed power that still hummed beneath her skin, the power she had so desperately tried to hide. They didn't shrink from it. They seemed to respect it. Isla's new immediate goal was simply to survive and to understand this strange, new group. She was deeply wary because everything about them defied her ingrained beliefs. Yet she was also desperate for any form of safety, any chance to live. Her old beliefs were being challenged by this new, unexpected acceptance, a stark contrast to the rejection that had nearly killed her. She saw a young woman, perhaps an omega like herself, laughing freely, her hair wild, her movements unburdened by the rigid rules Isla had grown up with. It was a disorienting, yet strangely alluring sight. Malachi looked at Isla not with pity, but with an intense, assessing gaze, a flicker of recognition and immense potential in his eyes. This look unnerved Isla, because it was so different from Kian's cold dismissal. But it also sparked a tiny, unfamiliar flicker of hope and intrigue within her, a fragile ember in the ashes of her shattered world. She was now inextricably linked to the savage shifters, beginning her journey of re-education and fundamentally challenging her ingrained beliefs about pack structure, power, and belonging. Her transformation from a broken omega to something new officially began in that moment. The world was a symphony of wildness. Isla woke to the sharp, invigorating scent of pine needles and damp earth, a stark contrast to the cloying sweetness of her old pack's ceremonial herbs. Sunlight, dappled and warm, filtered through the dense canopy, painting shifting patterns on the rough hide tent where she lay. Her body still ached, a dull throb that reminded her of Kian's betrayal, but the pervasive cold of despair had begun to recede, replaced by a cautious curiosity. She listened. The sounds of the savage shifters' camp were a vibrant tapestry, the crackle of distant fires, the low rumble of male voices, the high-pitched laughter of children, and the distinct, earthy scent of fur and sweat and freedom. She pushed aside the hide flap, stepping out into the heart of the temporary settlement. It was nothing like Silverwood. There were no neatly organized dens, no rigid pathways. Instead, shelters of hide and woven branches blended seamlessly with the forest, like extensions of the trees themselves. Shifters moved with an unburdened grace, their movements fluid and powerful, their eyes holding a fierce, independent spark. They wore rough-hewn clothes, often adorned with tribal markings that spoke of personal journeys, not inherited status. Isla watched a young woman, her hair wild with braids and feathers, expertly skinning a deer, her hands quick and sure. Nearby, a group of warriors sparred, their growls deep and guttural, yet without the aggressive edge she'd seen in Kian's training sessions. This was raw, untamed existence, focused on survival, communal effort, and a deep, intuitive connection to their inner wolf and the natural world. There were no strict hierarchies based on birth, but rather respect earned through strength and contribution. Isla was deeply confused by their ways, yet also cautiously curious. Her immediate goal was to understand these people and to figure out her place among them. She felt a complex mix of fear, because their untamed nature was so alien, and a nascent sense of awe at their unbridled freedom. Still, a deep-seated, almost subconscious longing for the familiar structure she'd lost tugged at her. She watched, a silent observer, as a small boy, no older than 5, chased a squirrel up a tree, his laughter echoing, pure and unrestrained. No one scolded him for being too loud or too wild. It was a disorienting, yet strangely alluring sight. "They do not hide their true selves," a low voice rumbled beside her. Malachi. He stood tall, his scarred face unreadable, his golden eyes fixed on the bustling camp. Unlike some. His gaze flickered to her, a knowing glint in his eyes. Isla flinched, a warmth rising to her cheeks. "It's different." "Different is not wrong," he replied, his voice soft but firm. "Only unfamiliar." He paused, then added, "Your power stirs. I feel it." Isla's breath hitched. She hadn't even realized. Just then, as if in response to his words, a small, uncontrolled burst of her power rippled outwards. A nearby patch of wildflowers, already vibrant, suddenly pulsed with unnaturally brilliant colors, their petals unfurling wider, faster, before settling back into their normal hue. Malachi, who had been quietly observing her, approached, not with fear or anger, but with a knowing, almost expectant look. His presence was a solid anchor in her new, bewildering reality. The forest floor was cool and damp beneath Isla's palms, the scent of rich earth filling her nostrils. Malachi stood over her, his shadow long and imposing, yet his voice was patient, a low rumble that vibrated through the ground. "Feel it, Isla. Not just the power within you, but the power around you, the pulse of the earth, the breath of the trees. Your wolf is part of this." Isla closed her eyes, trying to focus, but her mind was a whirlwind of frustration. Her goal was to control this wild, unpredictable magic, initially driven by a desperate desire to stop being a monster and to simply survive within this new clan. Malachi wasn't teaching her to suppress it, but to embrace it, to channel it. It was a terrifying concept because everything she'd been taught screamed otherwise. "Breathe with the forest," he instructed, his voice a steady rhythm. "Let your essence merge." She tried. She really did. She imagined roots growing from her feet, reaching deep into the soil. She felt a faint tremor, a spark, then whoosh! A sudden, uncontrolled burst of energy erupted from her, sending a shower of pine cones rattling down from a nearby tree. Isla gasped, her eyes flying open, shame burning her cheeks. "I can't!" she cried, her voice trembling. "It just explodes." Malachi merely raised an eyebrow. "It explodes because you fight it. You fear it. Your fear is a cage for your power. Break the cage." He knelt beside her, his gaze intense, piercing. "Tell me, Isla, what do you fear most about this power?" Her breath caught. "That it makes me defective," she whispered, the old wound aching. "That I'm a monster." "A monster?" Malachi scoffed, a low, rumbling sound that was almost a growl. "You are Omega Prime. Your power is life itself. It is a gift, not a curse. The Silverwood pack teaches fear because they do not understand true strength. They are weak. You are not." His words were a balm, a challenge, and a truth she desperately needed to hear. He demonstrated, his movements fluid, almost hypnotic. He extended a hand towards a patch of withered moss, and with a quiet hum, it brightened, regaining its vibrant green. "This is control," he said, his voice softer now. "This is harmony." Isla tried again, focusing on the moss, on Malachi's steady presence. She felt the spark, allowed it to grow, not fighting it, but guiding it. A tiny new shoot of green pushed through the moss. It was small, fragile, but it was her. A wave of exhilaration washed over her, pure and unadulterated. She was still struggling, often losing control, leading to minor mishaps. But these fleeting moments of mastery, where the power felt less like a curse and more like an extension of herself, were everything. This was the first time she felt a sense of agency over something that previously terrified her. During a particularly intense training session later that afternoon, Malachi deliberately pushed Isla to her absolute limit. "Give it all," he commanded, his voice sharp. Isla roared, a primal sound ripping from her throat, and a massive, uncontrolled surge of her power erupted, temporarily affecting the surrounding environment. The very ground trembled, and a sudden, unnatural gust of wind whipped through the trees, making branches crack. This display drew the immediate, wide-eyed attention of other savages, who watched with a mix of awe and trepidation. They had never seen such raw, untamed power. The scent of blood, sharp and metallic, ripped through the peaceful evening air. Isla's head snapped up, her senses suddenly heightened because the primal alarm had sounded. A guttural snarl echoed through the trees, followed by the terrified yelp of a pup. The savage camp, usually a hub of calm activity, erupted into chaos. "Intruders!" Malachi's roar cut through the din, his voice a whip of command. Isla's heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat in her ears. Her immediate goal was to protect those who had taken her in, who had shown her kindness when her own kind had cast her out. She saw the threat, a small rogue pack of shifters, gaunt and desperate, driven by hunger and a feral aggression. They were attacking the outer perimeter, their eyes wild, their movements erratic. One of them, a hulking brute with matted fur, lunged towards a group of savage pups, their small bodies huddled together in fear. Without thinking, Isla moved. Her body moved on instinct, fueled by a surge of primal protectiveness she hadn't known she possessed. She wasn't thinking about control or technique or the lessons Malachi had taught her. She was thinking only of the pups, of the terror in their eyes. A growl rose in her throat, raw and untamed, a sound she didn't recognize as her own. As the rogue shifter closed in, Isla thrust her hands forward. A wave of pure, untamed energy, hot and crackling, erupted from her palms. It wasn't refined, it wasn't graceful, but it was powerful. The rogue shifter was thrown backward, howling, his fur singed, his eyes wide with shock. He scrambled away, whimpering. Malachi, a blur of fur and muscle, slammed into another intruder, his own growls echoing through the trees. He glanced back at Isla, his golden eyes meeting hers across the clearing. There was no surprise in his gaze, only a deep, unwavering respect. He saw not a broken Omega, but a force to be reckoned with. The savages, inspired by Isla's unexpected display of power, surged forward. The battle was short, brutal, and decisive. The rogue shifters, disoriented and outmatched, fled back into the shadows of the forest, leaving behind only the lingering scent of fear and their own desperation. Isla stood panting, her muscles trembling, the taste of ozone on her tongue. The power still hummed beneath her skin, a fierce, exhilarating current. She had used it, not to hide, not to suppress, but to protect. This moment shifted her internal perspective from fearing her power to seeing its utility and potential for good. It was a weapon, yes, but also a shield. She looked at the pups, now safe, their eyes wide with awe, and a profound sense of purpose settled in her chest. Malachi approached her, his steps quiet, his presence a comforting anchor. He reached out, his calloused thumb gently wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek. His gaze, intense and knowing, made Isla feel truly seen and valued for the first time, a stark contrast to Kian's cold rejection. In that moment, a new path solidified before her, one forged not by fate, but by choice, by strength, and by the fierce, protective love for her new family. The air itself felt sick. A strange metallic tang, like old blood mixed with decay, clung to the wind, replacing the fresh, earthy scent Isla had grown to love in the wildlands. As the savage shifters moved deeper into the ancient forest, their usual boisterous chatter quieted. The trees, once towering sentinels of vibrant green, now stood gaunt and skeletal, their bark peeling like diseased skin. Their leaves, what few remained, were a sickly yellow-brown, shriveling even in the warmth of the sun. This wasn't the natural cycle of autumn. This was something far more sinister. Isla's heart clenched. She remembered the hushed whispers in Silverwood, the fearful tales of the blight. Now she saw its chilling reality. A patch of wild berries, usually plump and crimson, were shriveled and black, oozing a viscous, dark fluid. A deer lay motionless nearby, its fur dull, its eyes glazed over, no visible wounds, just a profound stillness that spoke of an unnatural end. Malachi, usually stoic, knelt beside the fallen creature, his scarred face grim, a muscle ticking in his jaw. "This is it," he rumbled, his voice low, heavy with foreboding. "The blight. It spreads faster than the legends foretold." Isla felt a profound sense of dread. Her immediate goal was to understand this new, pervasive threat and how it might impact her new home and the shifters she had come to care for. She had found a family here, a sense of belonging she'd never truly known in Silverwood, and the thought of losing it to this insidious disease twisted her gut. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What does it do?" "It saps life," Malachi explained, his gaze sweeping over the blighted landscape. From the land, from the animals, from the shifters themselves, it twists their minds, makes them feral, then consumes them. My ancestors spoke of it, a great sickness that nearly wiped out our kind centuries ago. They called it the shadow blight because it devoured light and hope. He stood, his powerful frame radiating a quiet fury. There was a prophecy, too. A chosen omega, they said, a catalyst. He looked at Isla then, his golden eyes piercing, speculative, a new intensity in their depths. Isla felt a jolt, a cold shiver running down her spine. Omega, catalyst. The words echoed the strange, wild power that had awakened within her after Kian's rejection. Could it be connected? Was her personal tragedy, her profound pain, somehow tied to this ancient, terrifying threat? The pressure building in her chest was immense because the scale of this danger was far larger than just her personal struggles or the internal politics of her old pack. Her focus began to shift from internal healing to external threat, because the survival of everyone she cared about was at stake. A scout from the Savage clan, a young, swift warrior named Riker, suddenly burst through the undergrowth, his face pale, his breathing ragged. "Malachi," he gasped, barely able to speak. "The blight. It's reached the Silverwood Pack's territory. It's devastating them." The news hit Isla like a physical blow, a cold wave washing over her. The world spun. Silverwood, her old pack, the place that had cast her out, now consumed by the very darkness she was meant to fight. Isla's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. The metallic tang of the blight intensified, a bitter taste in her mouth. She felt a sickening lurch, a mix of vindication and profound horror. Kian's incompetence, his pride, had led them to this. Malachi stepped closer, his presence a grounding force amidst the chaos of her thoughts. "The prophecy is real, Isla," he stated, his voice low but firm, cutting through her internal turmoil. "My ancestors kept the knowledge, hidden away, for a time such as this. You are not just an Omega. You carry the dormant gene of the original Omega Prime." Isla stared at him, bewildered. Omega Prime? What does that even mean? Her mind reeled, trying to grasp the enormity of his words. "It means your rejection," he explained, his gaze unwavering, "was not a curse. It was a necessary catalyst, a painful awakening." The Omega Prime's power is tied to the very life force of the shifter race, capable of healing the deepest wounds, even the blight. But it needed a profound shock to awaken, a severing of an old false bond to forge a true, unbreakable one with your own power. He paused, allowing his words to sink in, his eyes searching hers for understanding. Your pain, Isla, was not meaningless. It was the key. A torrent of emotions washed over Isla: shock, disbelief, a dawning sense of profound purpose, and a terrifying, immense responsibility. Her core misbelief that she was defective began to crumble, replaced by a terrifying sense of being chosen. She was not broken, she was forged. The irony was a bitter pill. Kian's act of cruelty, meant to destroy her, had instead unlocked a power capable of saving them all. So, I was meant to be rejected, she whispered, the question hanging heavy in the blighted air. All that pain? For this? Sometimes the greatest gifts are born from the deepest wounds, Malachi replied, his voice gentle. The blight is spreading rapidly, Isla. It has consumed half of the Silverwood territory. Kian's leadership is failing. He is weak because he relies on old traditions that cannot fight this new evil. He has no answers. You are the answer. Isla's goal underwent a profound shift. It was no longer just about survival or controlling a terrifying power. It was about understanding her true identity and the immense, world-saving responsibility now placed upon her. She was overwhelmed, initially resistant to the weight of this destiny, because it felt too heavy, too grand for the Omega she once was. But a flicker of profound purpose ignited within her, a burning ember of resolve. The game had changed. The stakes were no longer just personal, they were global. The air in the savage camp crackled with a new, urgent energy. The revelation of the Omega Prime and the Blight's relentless march had galvanized them. Isla felt the weight of every gaze, every unspoken question. She was no longer just a refugee. She was their hope. Then a new scent drifted on the wind: fear, desperation, and the faint, familiar musk of the Silverwood pack. A figure stumbled into the clearing, collapsing at the edge of their camp. It was a messenger, gaunt and haggard, his fur dull, his eyes sunken. He was barely recognizable, his body ravaged by the blight, a stark testament to its insidious power. He clutched a scroll, his hand trembling. Malachi moved forward, his posture protective, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his bone dagger. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. The messenger looked up, his eyes unfocused. "From Silverwood," he rasped, his voice hoarse. "Alpha-Kian, he sent me." He held out the scroll, his fingers shaking. Isla's breath caught. Kian. The name was a phantom limb, an ache she thought she'd buried. She stepped forward, her heart a drum against her ribs, a complex mix of emotions swirling within her. She felt a profound mix of vindication, seeing Kian's desperation, and lingering anger for his betrayal. Yet, a surprising pang of pity for her former home and the suffering of its innocent members also pricked at her. She took the scroll. The parchment was rough, the ink smudged, Kian's handwriting frantic. It was a desperate, almost incoherent plea for help, acknowledging the Blight's devastating impact on their territory and hinting at his own failures to contain it. "The pack, dying," it read, the words scrawled unevenly. "We need your power. Please, help us." There was no mention of her name, no direct apology, just a desperate, raw cry for salvation. He was too proud to even acknowledge her directly. Isla looked up, her gaze hardening. The messenger, weakened and disoriented, did not recognize the transformed Isla standing before him. He saw only a powerful female, clearly a leader among these savages. This scene forced Isla to directly confront the devastating consequences of Kian's actions and the suffering of her former pack. It directly set up the central moral dilemma of the climax: whether to seek personal vengeance or rise above her pain to offer salvation. Your Alpha asks for help, Isla stated, her voice clear and strong, devoid of the tremor it once held. She didn't ask, she commanded. But help comes at a price. She looked at Malachi, then back at the messenger, her eyes gleaming with a new, fierce resolve. Tell your Alpha this. I will return, but not as a supplicant. I return as their only hope, and it will be on my terms. Every old prejudice, every outdated law, every ounce of his pride must be surrendered to my command. Only then will the blight be lifted. Her resolve to help, or not to help, began to solidify, driven by a new sense of power and purpose. The messenger stared, his mouth agape, then nodded weakly. Kian, seeing the overwhelming depth of the blight's devastation and the undeniable strength Isla now commanded, would reluctantly, bitterly agree to her terms. The stage was set. Isla's journey was now irrevocably pointed towards her past, but she was no longer the same Omega who had fled it. The scroll from Kian lay crumpled in Isla's hand, its desperate plea a stark contrast to the strength now thrumming through her veins. Sleepless nights had blurred into a single, agonizing question. Could she? Should she? Save them? The Silverwood pack had cast her out, branded her defective, shattered her soul. Yet, the blight was a monstrous thing, indiscriminate in its hunger. It threatened not just her old home, but all shifters. She felt it, clear as day, the agonizing pull of her Omega Prime power, yearning to heal, to restore. Malachi found her by the glowing embers of the fire, his presence a quiet anchor in the storm of her thoughts. He didn't speak, just sat beside her, his warmth a comforting weight. He begged, Isla whispered, her voice raw. Kian, he begged. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. And what does your heart say, little flame? Malachi murmured, his golden eyes reflecting the firelight. Not your anger, not your pain, your true heart. Isla closed her eyes, picturing the blighted lands, the dying trees, the fear in Riker's eyes. She saw the faces of the innocent pups in Silverwood, the ones who had no say in Kian's cruelty. Deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't about Kian. It was about something far, far bigger. It says, "They need me," she finally said, her voice gaining strength, because the truth resonated deep in her bones. Not for him, for the world, for the future of all shifters. She opened her eyes, meeting Malachi's gaze. I will go back. Her decision hung in the air, a sacred vow. Not as a supplicant, but as their Alpha. A growl rose in her throat, a sound of fierce resolve. I will heal the blight, and I will establish a new order where Omegas are revered, not subjugated, where strength is measured by spirit, not just by birthright. Malachi's lips curved into a slow, proud smile. Then we go with you. Soon after, Isla stood before the assembled savage shifters, the morning sun painting their faces in shades of gold and bronze. The air thickened with anticipation. The blight, she declared, her voice ringing with a newfound authority that surprised even herself, threatens us all. My former pack suffers, and through them, the sickness spreads. I am Omega Prime. My purpose is to heal. I will return to Silverwood. A ripple went through the crowd. But I do not go alone. I go as your leader. We will heal the land, and we will forge a new path for all shifters, one built on unity, respect, and true power. What followed was a roar of approval, a thunderous chorus of growls and howls that shook the very ground. They saw her courage, her conviction. They saw a queen. The savage shifters, deeply inspired by Isla's strength, vision, and willingness to sacrifice, pledged their unwavering loyalty, forming a unified front ready to march with her towards the blighted lands. This declaration solidified her leadership among them, because they recognized the true Alpha spirit within her. Her purpose was clear, her resolve unshakable. The journey back to her past would begin. The journey was a descent into a nightmare. With every step they took, the vibrant life of the wildlands receded, replaced by a landscape of creeping decay. The air grew heavy, thick with the sickly sweet scent of rot and despair. Isla marched at the head of the combined savage forces, Malachi a silent, powerful shadow at her side. Her heart ached, because the suffering of the land was a physical pain in her own soul. The trees, once proud sentinels, twisted into grotesque skeletal forms, their branches clawing at the bruised sky. The ground beneath their boots was soft, spongy with rot, and strangely silent. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Only the soft, rhythmic thud of their footsteps broke the oppressive quiet. This was the blight's domain, a testament to its insidious power. They found more than just dying vegetation. They encountered animals, once graceful creatures, now stumbling and disoriented, their eyes clouded with a strange madness. Isla reached out to a small whimpering fox, its fur matted, its body trembling. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, she focused her power, a gentle hum of life-giving energy. The fox shuddered, then slowly, miraculously, its eyes cleared. Its fur gained a faint sheen. It nudged her hand, a silent thank you, before darting back into the undergrowth. Small acts of healing, yes, but each one drained her, because the blight fought back, a constant, unseen resistance. Not only that, but they encountered corrupted shifters, their forms twisted, their minds lost to the blight's influence. They were aggressive, feral, their howls filled with a primal, desperate hunger. Malachi and the savage warriors moved like a single deadly unit, protecting Isla, clearing the path. He fought with a brutal efficiency, his growls deep and guttural, a stark reminder of the wild power he commanded. "Conserve your strength, little flame," he'd murmur, his voice rough with concern, his hand briefly brushing her arm. "You'll need it for the heart of this sickness." Isla's goal was to reach her former pack and prepare for the massive healing ritual, but this journey was a brutal education. She saw the true scale of the blight, its relentless spread, and the utter devastation it wrought. She felt a profound mix of horror at its widespread destruction and a deepening, empathetic connection to the suffering land. Her determination hardened with every step, because there was no turning back now. This journey visually reinforced the urgency and terrifying scale of the blight, solidifying Isla's commitment to her mission. It also served as a training ground, showcasing her developing mastery over her power and highlighting her growing, unwavering bond with Malachi and the savages who proved their loyalty in the face of danger. By the time they reached the ravaged borders of the Silverwood pack, the air was thick with the stench of death and decay. The familiar scent of her old home was tainted, corrupted, and there, standing alone amidst the desolation, was Kian. He was a shadow of the Alpha she remembered, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow, a desperate, haggard figure against the backdrop of ruin. The moment their eyes locked, a jolt, sharp and electric, passed between Isla and Kian. He saw her, truly saw her, not the broken Omega he had cast out, but the powerful woman leading a formidable force of savage shifters. His jaw dropped, his eyes widening in disbelief, then shame. He was utterly shocked, his alpha pride shattered by the blight and his failing leadership. "Isla?" Kian's voice was a raw croak, barely a whisper. He took a hesitant step forward, then another, as if drawn by an invisible string. It's really you." Isla stood her ground, her spine rigid, her gaze unwavering. She felt no triumph, no desire for vengeance, only a cold, clear resolve. The man before her was a husk of his former self, consumed by the consequences of his own arrogance. "It is," she confirmed, her voice steady, resonant with an authority that had been forged in fire and betrayal. "And I am here because your pack is dying, Kian, because your pride nearly destroyed them all." He flinched, the words striking home. I made mistakes," he stammered, his eyes darting to the blighted landscape, then back to her, desperation etched on his face. "The blight, it's too strong. We're losing. We need your help. Please, Isla, for the pack." Isla's heart skipped a beat. Please. The word, from Kian, was a bitter, satisfying victory. Help comes at a price, Alpha, she stated, her voice devoid of emotion. Because this was not a negotiation. It was a declaration. A steep one. Kian swallowed hard, his gaze falling away. Anything. Just tell me what you need. First, Isla began, her voice gaining power, you will surrender all authority to me. Your laws, your traditions, your prejudices, they are what weakened this pack. They will be abandoned. The savages and the Silverwood remnants will become one. Under my command, there will be no more defective omegas, no more subjugation, only unity, only strength. Her words were a hammer, shattering the remnants of his old world. Kian looked up, his eyes filled with a desperate plea. My pack, they won't understand. They are set in their ways. Then they will learn, Isla countered, her voice unwavering, or they will perish. The blight cares nothing for your traditions, Kian, only for life, and I am life. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. Second, you will publicly acknowledge your error, not just to me, but to your entire pack. You will tell them why you rejected me and why you were wrong. You will tell them that I, the defective Omega, am their only hope. This was the true test, the ultimate humiliation. Kian's face contorted, a battle raging within him. His alpha pride, once so formidable, crumbled under the weight of his pack's suffering and Isla's undeniable power. He looked at the blighted trees, then at the strong, unified front of the savages behind Isla. He looked at her, truly seeing the Omega Prime, the queen he had foolishly cast aside. He knew he had no choice. I agree, Kian rasped, the words tearing from him, a humiliating but necessary pill for his alpha pride to swallow. On your terms. Isla simply nodded, a quiet, powerful affirmation. Her goal was to establish her absolute authority and lay down the terms for intervention, ensuring her mission was not undermined by Kian's pride or the pack's old ways. She felt a profound sense of power and control, a stark and satisfying contrast to her past self. There was a detached satisfaction in seeing Kian's humbled, desperate state, but no desire for reconciliation. The stage was set. The old world would either break, or it would bend to the will of the Omega Prime. The air vibrated with a raw, primal energy, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence that usually clung to the blighted lands. Isla stood at the heart of the ravaged Silverwood territory, her arms outstretched, her eyes closed in fierce concentration. Around her, the combined forces of the savages and the Silverwood remnants watched, a tense, expectant silence hanging over them. Her goal was clear: to heal the blight, to purge this insidious rot that devoured life. She began the ancient Omega Prime ritual, a complex dance of energy and intention, drawing on the very essence of the earth and the life force of every shifter present. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, a wave of shimmering emerald light pulsed from her, pushing back against the encroaching decay. The blight, however, was far more powerful and insidious than anticipated. It wasn't just a disease, it was a malevolent, sentient force. It fought back. The ground beneath Isla's feet trembled, not with her power, but with the blight's furious resistance. Twisted vines, black and thorny, lashed out from the dying trees, like skeletal fingers trying to grasp her. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of bitter almonds and despair, trying to choke her. Isla gritted her teeth, pushing harder, because every ounce of her being screamed to heal. Her power flowed, a river of life, but the blight was an ocean of death, constantly pushing back. She felt it draining her, siphoning her energy, each wave of resistance leaving her weaker. Not only that, but corrupted echoes of her past fears began to manifest in her mind, insidious whispers that tried to break her resolve. Defective, unworthy. You are a monster. Meanwhile, a different kind of resistance stirred among the Silverwood remnants. Old prejudices, deeply ingrained, resurfaced. A low murmur rippled through their ranks. This savage magic, it's unnatural," one elder whispered, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "The old ways are being abandoned for this wildness." Another, a warrior named Torvin, openly scoffed. "She's just an Omega. What can she do against this?" They subtly undermined her efforts, their fear clinging to old beliefs, openly distrusting her savage magic, refusing to fully cooperate. Their skepticism was a cold draft against Isla's burning resolve, a constant drain on her focus. Isla felt profound frustration. Physical and mental exhaustion began to creep in, a heavy cloak settling over her. Her power, once so boundless, seemed insufficient, and the old prejudices she fought to overcome resurfaced, threatening to derail everything. The blight intensified, a wave of darkness surging forward, consuming a patch of newly greened grass. The ritual faltered, a visible, devastating setback. Her heart sank because the task felt impossible. The air thickened, suffocating Isla with the weight of failure. The blight, sensing her struggle, surged with renewed vigor. Its tendrils of decay crept closer, threatening to overwhelm the fragile pocket of healing she had managed to create. Isla's focus wavered, her energy dangerously low. Suddenly, a roar. It wasn't Malachi's deep, steady rumble. It was Kian's, sharp with desperation and a misguided sense of alpha authority. "Fall back! I will draw its attention," he bellowed, his voice cracking with strain. He had been watching, his face a mask of shame and fear, desperate to prove his worth, to reclaim some semblance of control. Before she could move, Kian, in a desperate, misguided attempt to regain control, lunged towards a massive, blighted creature that had emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing with malevolent green light. He tried to engage it with an old Silverwood battle ritual, a move meant for physical combat, not for the insidious, mind-bending power of the blight. It was a rash, incompetent decision, born of pride and desperation, and it severely jeopardized the fragile ritual. The blight creature, a twisted parody of a wolf, easily swatted Kian aside, sending him sprawling. But its attention, now drawn, shifted. Its glowing eyes fixed on Malachi, who had instinctively moved to protect Isla, placing himself between her and the direct threat. The creature lunged towards Malachi, its claws dripping with corrosive blight essence. Isla's breath caught. No! A wave of agonizing fear for Malachi, for the man who had seen her worth, ripped through her. Her immediate goal was to protect her allies and continue the healing, but she was forced to make a devastating choice. She had to divert a significant portion of her dwindling power, her life-giving essence, to save him. Without thinking, her body moved on instinct. She slammed her hands forward, unleashing a raw, protective burst of energy that intercepted the blight creature, throwing it back. The force of it left her trembling, her vision blurring at the edges. The blight, sensing her depletion, roared, a sound that echoed through her very bones and surged even more violently. The ground beneath them cracked, and fresh waves of decay washed over the already blighted land. Isla felt a renewed, bitter sense of betrayal by Kian's incompetence and lingering pride. His attempt to help had nearly cost her Malachi, and had certainly cost them precious ground in the fight against the blight. She felt a crushing sense of defeat as her efforts seemed to unravel due to external and internal forces. Malachi, though shaken and nursing a deep, painful scratch on his arm, where the blight creature's claw had grazed him, looked at Isla with concern. "Conserve your strength, little flame," he urged, his voice rough with pain, but his eyes unwavering. "Don't waste it on foolishness." His gaze flickered to Kian, who lay nearby, stunned and utterly useless, a mix of profound shame, fear, and dawning realization on his face. Kian's incompetence, his inability to adapt, had become a greater threat than the blight itself. This critical personal blow reinforced the danger of Kian's flawed leadership and the immense cost of Isla's mission. It tested her commitment to saving those who still clung to the old ways, because their very survival now depended on her sacrifice. The silence roared in Isla's ears. She retreated from the ritual site, her legs heavy, her body screaming with exhaustion. The blight had won this round, The air was thick with its sickly scent, a constant reminder of her failure. She stumbled through the dying trees, seeking refuge in a secluded, blighted hollow, where the darkness seemed to swallow even the moonlight. Her power, once a vibrant river, was now a flickering ember, barely sustaining her. She collapsed onto the cold, damp earth, her chest aching with a pain far deeper than physical exhaustion. The blight seemed to whisper to her, its insidious voice echoing her deepest fears. "You are not enough. You are defective," just like they said. The old misbelief, the one she thought she had buried, clawed its way back to the surface. Despite her transformation, despite everything she'd learned, she was still fundamentally flawed, or her power was simply not enough to overcome such a vast evil. Was she truly Omega Prime, or just a fool who believed a prophecy? Her world tilted. She didn't know what scared her more, the Blight's relentless march, or the terrifying thought that she had dragged Malachi and the savages into a losing battle. She briefly questioned her choice to return, wondering if she should have just let the old pack perish, let Kian face his own ruin. Why had she risked everything for those who had discarded her? The goal seemed utterly impossible. Utter despair washed over her, a cold, suffocating wave. This was her psychological rock bottom, where she had to choose to succumb to the overwhelming hopelessness or find a deeper, more primal well of strength within herself. As the silence stretched, a shadow fell over her. Malachi. He knelt beside her, his presence a warm, solid anchor in her desolate world. He didn't offer empty platitudes, no grand pronouncements. He simply sat, his hand reaching out to gently cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. His golden eyes, usually so fierce, were soft, filled with an unwavering belief that shone even in the darkness. "You are not broken, little flame," he murmured, his voice a low, comforting rumble. "You are forged, your empathy. That is your strength. That is the true heart of the Omega Prime. It is not a weakness, as the old pack believes, but the very source of your power. It is why you feel their pain, why you fight for them, even when they do not deserve it." His words were a lifeline, pulling her back from the abyss. Her soul answered, a faint tremor of recognition. He helped her see that her empathy was not a weakness, but the very source of her Omega Prime power, because it allowed her to connect with life itself. In the quiet that followed, Isla felt a flicker of hope, a tiny spark in the crushing darkness. She had to find the strength not from external validation, but from within her own redefined sense of self. The fight was not over. The cold, damp earth pressed against Isla's cheek, a stark reminder of her despair. The Blight's whispers still echoed in her mind. "You are not enough. You are defective." But then, Malachi's voice, a low, comforting rumble, cut through the darkness. "Your empathy, that is your strength. That is the true heart of the Omega Prime." His words were a lifeline, pulling her back from the abyss. She felt it, clear as day, a tiny spark igniting in the crushing darkness. Could it be true? Could her biggest perceived weakness actually be her greatest power? She pushed herself up, her muscles screaming in protest, but a new kind of energy, warm and vibrant, began to flow through her veins. Malachi sat beside her, his golden eyes unwavering, a silent promise of belief. He didn't tell her what to do. He simply was. His presence was a solid anchor, grounding her. Isla closed her eyes, focusing not on the Blight's oppressive weight, but on Malachi's quiet strength, on the pulse of the earth beneath her, on the faint, hopeful scent of new growth fighting through the decay. She began to breathe, deep, slow breaths, just as Malachi had taught her. She reached inward, past the fear, past the pain, past the lingering echoes of Kian's rejection. She connected with the very essence of the Omega Prime gene. It wasn't about raw force, she realized, but about a deep, ancient, empathetic connection to the land, to the life force of all shifters, to the very fabric of existence. Her empathy, once seen as a weakness by the old pack, was actually the key to unlocking the full, boundless potential of her healing magic. It wasn't just about power. It was about love. It was about connection. A soft, ethereal light began to emanate from her, bathing the blighted hollow in a gentle, emerald glow. The decaying plants around them seemed to sigh, a faint, almost imperceptible green returning to their withered leaves. This revelation was a spiritual awakening because it completed her internal transformation. She was not just a healer, she was a conduit for life itself. Her despair lifted, replaced by a quiet, fierce resolve. She finally understood. She was Omega Prime, not despite her empathy, but because of it. Isla opened her eyes, meeting Malachi's gaze. A profound sense of clarity filled her. "I know how to stop it," she said, her voice steady, filled with a new, powerful conviction. "But it will require everything, and it will require them." She looked towards the distant, blighted territory of the Silverwood pack. Both packs unified. This was the climb back. She had found her purpose, and with it, a daring, unconventional final plan that defied all old traditions. The air in the makeshift command tent was thick with tension, heavy as a coming storm. Kian stood before Isla, his face etched with exhaustion and the bitter taste of defeat. Around them, the remaining Silverwood elders huddled, their eyes wary, their bodies still weak from the blight. Isla had called this meeting because the time for hesitation was over. "The blight is a living thing," Isla began, her voice clear and strong, resonating with the power she now wielded. "It feeds on division, on fear, on the very traditions that bind you. My power, the Omega Prime's power, can heal it, but not alone. It requires unity. It requires all of us." She looked directly at Kian, her gaze unwavering. "Your pride, your old laws, your prejudices, they are the chains that bind you. They will be broken. You will surrender all authority. To me." Kian flinched, his jaw tightening. His alpha pride, though shattered, still clung to him like a tattered cloak. "My pack." "They will not accept this," he rasped, his voice raw. "To follow an Omega, a rejected one." "They will follow their Alpha," Isla countered, her voice like steel. "And I am their Alpha now, not by birthright, but by necessity, by strength, by the very life I offer them." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a low, intense murmur. "Do you want your pack to survive, Kian? Or do you want to cling to a dying pride? The blight cares nothing for your titles, only for life. And I am life." Malachi, standing silently behind Isla, stepped forward, his presence a powerful endorsement. "Her way is the only way," he rumbled, his voice deep and authoritative. "We, the savages, will fight by her side. We will share our knowledge, our strength, but only if you truly unite, only if you abandon the old ways that led you to this ruin." Kian looked from Isla to Malachi, then to his elders, their faces pale with fear. He saw the overwhelming depth of the blight's devastation, the undeniable strength Isla now commanded, and the unwavering loyalty of the savages. He knew he had no choice. His shoulders slumped in defeat, a bitter but necessary pill for his alpha pride to swallow. I agree," he finally choked out, the words tearing from him. "On your terms, for the pack." A collective sigh of relief rippled through the tent. Isla nodded, a quiet, powerful affirmation. "Then we prepare," she stated, her gaze sweeping over the assembled shifters. "We march at dawn, together." This scene powerfully demonstrated Isla's leadership in action, bridging the gap between the two worlds she now embodied. It signified the true beginning of the new order and set the stage for the climactic battle against the blight, showcasing the power of unity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and grays, a massive surge of the blight's energy erupted from its core, a dark, pulsating wave that spread across the horizon. It was a final, desperate challenge, signaling the ultimate struggle that awaited them. The air was thick with a chilling silence, broken only by the rhythmic thud of hundreds of paws against the blighted earth. Isla marched at the head of the unified pack, her heart a drumbeat of anticipation and resolve. On one side, the lean, wild figures of the savage shifters moved with silent grace, their eyes gleaming with fierce determination. On the other, the Silverwood remnants, still bearing the marks of the blight, walked with a newfound, desperate resolve, their fear slowly replaced by a fragile hope. Malachi was a constant, comforting presence at her side, his hand occasionally brushing hers, a silent promise of unwavering support. The journey was a descent into the blight's heart, a landscape of pure desolation. Twisted, skeletal trees clawed at the bruised sky, their branches like gnarled fingers. The ground was spongy with decay, the air thick with the stench of rot and despair. The blight actively fought back, a malevolent, sentient entity. It created disorienting illusions, whispers of past failures, fleeting images of loved ones lost, trying to break their resolve. It sapped their energy, a cold drain that pulled at their very life force. Corrupted, aggressive creatures, born of its decay, lunged from the shadows, their eyes burning with unnatural green light. "Stay focused!" Malachi roared, his voice cutting through the illusions, his powerful form a blur as he intercepted a hulking blight beast protecting Isla. His growls were deep, guttural, a primal symphony of defense. He fought with a brutal efficiency, clearing the path for her, because her strength was needed for the ritual, not for battle. Isla focused her own power, a shimmering shield of emerald light, deflecting the blight's insidious attacks. Her ultimate goal was to reach the core of the blight and unleash her full, refined Omega Prime power. She felt intense anticipation, unwavering resolve, and a fierce, protective love for her new, unified pack. Every step was a prayer, every breath a commitment. The fear was gone, replaced by a burning determination. They pushed through a final, dense thicket of blighted thorns, their bodies aching, their resolve tested. The air grew heavy, almost suffocating, as they approached the epicenter. And then it opened up. Before them lay a vast, festering crater, a wound on the earth pulsating with dark, malevolent energy. This was the blight's heart, its source, its ultimate stronghold. The final confrontation was imminent. The battle for the very soul of the shifter world was about to begin. The air thickened, suffocating Isla with the blight's malevolent presence. Before them lay the crater, a gaping wound in the earth, pulsating with dark, sickly green energy. This was the blight's heart, its source, its ultimate stronghold. Isla felt it, clear as day, a cold, insidious tendril reaching for her own life force. Her heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs, but beneath the fear, a fierce resolve burned. This was it, the final showdown. "Hold the line!" Malachi roared, his voice a deep, guttural command that resonated through the unified pack. He stood beside Isla, a formidable shield of muscle and fur, his golden eyes blazing with protective fire. Around them, the combined forces of the savages and the Silverwood remnants braced themselves. The blight creatures, twisted parodies of forest animals, surged from the crater, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent, their forms grotesque and unsettling. Isla closed her eyes for a fleeting second, drawing on every lesson Malachi had taught her, on every ounce of the Omega Prime power that now coursed through her veins. She felt the ancient connection to the earth, to the life force of every shifter, to the very fabric of existence. Her empathy, once a quiet whisper, now roared to life, a powerful guiding force. When her name left his lips, Isla, she opened her eyes. A wave of shimmering emerald light erupted from her, not just a burst of raw power, but a living, breathing force of nature. It slammed into the blight creatures, not destroying them, but healing them, transforming their twisted forms back into their natural, terrified states. They whimpered, confused, and fled into the forest. But the blight's core fought back, a massive, shadowy tendril lashing out, aiming directly for Isla. Malachi met it head-on, transforming into his lichen form, a magnificent beast of silver-tipped fur and raw power. He snarled, tearing at the blight's essence, his claws ripping through its shadowy form, buying Isla precious seconds. Meanwhile, Kian, seeing the true horror of the blight and the sheer magnitude of Isla's power, had a moment of true, selfless remorse. He saw the devastation he had caused. He saw his pack dying. Without another word, he lunged, not at the blight's core, but at a smaller, corrupted tendril that was about to ensnare a group of Silverwood pups. He used his own alpha strength, a desperate physical act of protection, drawing its attention away from Isla. Isla felt it, the shift. Kian's small, selfless act, a flicker of true alpha spirit, created a momentary weakness in the blight's defense. This was her chance. She channeled everything, her empathy, her rage, her love for her new family, her desire to heal. She became a conduit for life itself. A blinding pillar of emerald light shot from her, piercing the heart of the blight. The crater groaned, a guttural sound of agony, and then, slowly, agonizingly, it began to recede. The dark energy pulsed, then withered, crumbling into dust, leaving behind a scarred but visibly regenerating landscape. Isla stood, utterly exhausted, her body trembling, but triumphant. The air cleared, filled with the fresh scent of rain and new growth. The blight was defeated. Her transformation was complete. She had not only mastered her power, but had used it to save them all, proving her immense worth. She looked at Malachi, still in his lichen form, his golden eyes filled with pride. And then she looked at Kian, who stood humbled, defeated, but alive. A profound silence settled over the crater, broken only by the soft rustle of newly emerging leaves and the quiet murmurs of the unified pack. The air, once thick with decay, now smelled of damp earth and fresh pine. Isla felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her, so deep it threatened to pull her under. But it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came after a battle won. She had done it. The blight was gone. Malachi shifted back to his human form, his powerful body gleaming with sweat, his eyes still holding the wildness of his wolf. He moved to her side, his arm wrapping around her, a silent, comforting anchor. Around them, the immediate consequences of the climax unfolded. Survivors from both the Silverwood pack and the savages, now truly unified, began to tend to the wounded, their movements a mix of relief and purpose. The old animosities seemed to have dissolved in the face of shared trauma and shared victory. Soon after, Kian approached, his steps hesitant, his head bowed. He was a shadow of his former self, his alpha pride utterly shattered, but his spirit, for the first time, seemed truly humbled. He stopped before Isla, his eyes, once so cold, now filled with a raw, painful remorse. "Isla," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. I was wrong. About everything. About you. About the bond. My pride. It nearly destroyed us all." He looked at the healing land, then back at her, his gaze unwavering. "I am sorry. Truly sorry. You saved us. You saved me." Isla met his gaze, her own eyes clear, devoid of the bitterness she had carried for so long. She saw the genuine remorse in him, the weight of his failures. "Your apology is accepted, Kian," she said, her voice steady, gentle but firm. There was no triumph in her tone, only a quiet understanding. "But what was broken cannot be mended in the old way. The fated bond, it is gone. And my heart, it lies elsewhere." She glanced at Malachi, who squeezed her hand in silent support. Her words were a definitive closure on their past, because she had moved beyond the pain. Kian nodded slowly, a profound sadness in his eyes, but also a flicker of acceptance. He had lost her, yes, but he had gained his pack's survival. He turned, his shoulders still heavy, but with a new direction, and began to help organize the wounded. no longer the alpha, but a humbled member of the pack. This scene provided crucial closure on the Kian conflict, allowing Isla to move forward without lingering resentment. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and soft pink, a spontaneous, heartfelt celebration began among the unified shifters. It was a blend of savage traditions and newly shared rituals, a chaotic symphony of laughter, relieved tears, and the soft, hopeful murmurs of a community reborn. This was their new beginning, the forging of a true, cohesive community, because they had faced death together and emerged stronger. Months later, the Silverwood territory, once a blighted wasteland, hummed with renewed life. The trees stood tall and vibrant, their leaves a lush green, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. Wildflowers bloomed in riotous colors, a testament to Isla's power, a living monument to her healing grace. The air was clean, crisp, filled with the sweet scent of pine and fresh earth. Isla stood on a rise overlooking the thriving, unified pack, a sense of profound peace settling in her chest. Omegas, once relegated to the shadows, now moved freely, their voices strong, their healing gifts revered. They were leaders, healers, vital members of the community, their unique strengths celebrated. The rigid hierarchies of the old pack had dissolved, replaced by a fluid structure based on respect, contribution, and the natural flow of power. Kian, humbled but dedicated, worked tirelessly alongside the others, his leadership now one of service, not command. Malachi came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her back against his solid chest. His scent, wild, earthy, and uniquely him, filled her senses, a comfort deeper than any fated bond. "Our kingdom, little flame," he murmured, his lips brushing her hair. "Forged by your hands." Isla smiled, leaning into his embrace. "Our kingdom," she corrected softly, because it was built together, on choice, on mutual respect, on a love that defied destiny. Their connection was palpable and profound, a love based on choice, mutual respect, and a shared journey, not on a fated bond. She reached up, touching the simple circlet woven from newly healed forest elements that rested on her brow. It wasn't a crown of gold or jewels, but a symbol she had forged herself, representing her self-made authority and destiny. It was her Omega Prime crown, a testament to resilience, to the power of embracing one's true nature. She had redefined destiny, found true love and partnership based on choice, and created a society founded on her values of equality and empathy. The core emotional question was definitively answered. She had risen above profound betrayal, embraced her true power, and saved those who cast her out, forging a destiny far greater than any fate. Epilogue: years later, the unified pack thrived under the joint leadership of Alpha Isla and Lycan Malachi. Their territory, now simply known as the New Forest, was a beacon of harmony and strength, a living testament to the power of unity and the triumph of choice. The memory of the blight served as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the fragility of life and the strength found in true unity. Isla watched her daughter, Camilla, a vibrant, curious pup with Malachi's golden eyes and Isla's moss-green hair, chase butterflies through a field of wildflowers. Camilla's laughter, bright and unrestrained, echoed through the trees. She was a blend of both worlds, a living symbol of their new beginning. Her power, Isla knew, would be balanced, blending the old and new ways, hinting at a harmonious and evolving future for all shifters, free from the constraints of rigid tradition. Malachi joined her, his arm encircling her waist, pulling her close. "She has your spirit," he murmured, his gaze soft as he watched their daughter. Isla leaned into him, her heart full. "And your fire." Their bond, built on choice and unwavering support, was a beacon for all, a love story written not by fate, but by two souls who chose each other again and again. The new forest stretched before them, vibrant and alive, a testament to the queen who had forged her own crown, proving that sometimes the greatest love isn't about fate, but about choice.